You get home from something that was actually good. Close friends, maybe even a party you were glad you went to. But the second the door closes behind you, you don't feel recharged. You feel wrung out, like something got emptied instead of filled. And somewhere along the way, you probably learned to read that feeling as a verdict on you. Maybe you don't actually like people. Maybe something's wrong with you for feeling this tired after something fun. But what if that feeling isn't a verdict at all? What if it's just a reading on a gauge, a number going down, the same way it would for anything else that costs energy to run? Today we're looking at why socializing can drain you even when you loved every minute of it, and why that drain is one of the most real, most measurable things about how you're built. One quick note before we start. This is psychology for reflection, not a clinical diagnosis. Needing recovery time after socializing is a trait, not a disorder. Now, let's begin. Let's start with the phrase you've probably used 100 times without really questioning it. Social battery. It sounds like a cute figure of speech. It isn't just that. The psychotherapist Marty Olson-Laney proposed that introverts and extroverts actually rely on different dominant neural pathways to process stimulation, a longer, more effortful route associated with focus, memory, and inward reflection, rather than the shorter, faster route that rewards quick outward action. Here's what that means in a room full of people. Every new face, every fast-moving conversation, every burst of noise gets routed through that longer, more resource-hungry pathway in your brain. It's not that you're choosing to find it effortful. The effort is built into the wiring itself. So when you say your battery is low after a party, you're not being dramatic. You're accurately reporting on a system that spends more to process the exact same room everyone else is standing in for free. Have you ever watched a friend leave a gathering just as energized as when they arrived, and wondered what was different about them? So if the room costs you something, what is it doing for everyone who seems to float through it untouched? The neuroscientists Richard Depew and Paul Collins proposed that extroversion is linked to a brain that's more sensitive to dopamine, the chemical tied to reward and incentive. A new conversation, an unfamiliar face, a burst of social attention. For a highly reward-sensitive brain, each one lands like a small payment. That's the part that gets missed. Extroverts at a party aren't simply not getting tired. Their system is being actively topped up by the very stimulation that's draining yours. Same room, same noise, two completely different transactions happening at the same time. Which means the gap you feel isn't a character flaw showing up late in the evening. It's two different reward systems running two different ledgers, and only one of them happens to be getting paid by the party. Next time you watch someone light up in a crowd that's wearing you down, remember, you're not failing to enjoy it the way they are. You're simply not the one collecting the dividend. By the time you're on your way home, something else has already been happening in your body for hours. The neuroscientist Bruce McEwen described a concept called allostatic load, the physical wear a body accumulates when it has to stay activated and adapting for too long. Prolonged social stimulation keeps your stress response system switched on, heart rate up, attention scattered wide, cortisol quietly rising the entire time you're just having a nice evening. That's the biology behind what people call a social hangover. It isn't sadness, and it isn't dislike of the people you were with. It's a nervous system that's been running a low, steady activation cost for 3 hours straight, finally allowed to power down. So the heaviness in your limbs on the drive home, the need for silence the second you're through the door, that's not you being antisocial. That's a real physiological bill coming due, the same way a workout leaves your muscles sore hours after you've stopped moving. Has your body ever handed you that bill hours after the fun had already ended, so it almost felt disconnected from the night itself? Here's the part that changes how you should treat what comes next. The researcher Tui V. Nguyen has studied what she calls a solitude deactivation effect. Voluntary time alone measurably lowers physiological arousal, giving an overstimulated nervous system the quiet it needs to come back down to baseline. If that idea sounds familiar, it should. It's the same mechanism we talked about in the episode on why you need time alone to recharge. This is that exact system, just triggered by a different door. Solitude here isn't retreat. It's maintenance. It's the only input your specific system actually responds to once it's been running hot. No amount of willpower substitutes for it, the same way no amount of willpower refills a phone that's been unplugged. If you're quietly nodding along right now, recognizing every one of these evenings you've lived through, that feeling is exactly what this channel is for. I'll leave a subscribe button right here for whenever you're ready. What does your version of powering back down actually look like? Silence, your own bed, or just being left alone with your thoughts for an hour? You may have noticed something that doesn't seem to add up. You can genuinely have a wonderful time and still come home needing to lie in the dark and speak to absolutely no one. The personality researcher Brian Little offers a concept called free traits, the idea that people can step outside their natural disposition to show up for something that matters to them: a close friend's birthday, a partner's big night, a reunion you didn't want to miss. Acting outside your baseline like that is real, and the enjoyment is real too. But Little's research is clear that it still draws from a limited reserve, one that has to be repaid afterward in what he calls a restorative niche. So, the after-party introvert, the one who laughed all night and still needed 2 days of quiet to recover, was never lying about having fun. They were simply spending from an account that doesn't refill itself just because the withdrawal felt good. Has anyone ever used your exhaustion the next day as proof you didn't actually enjoy yourself, when the truth was you enjoyed it enough to pay for it? Here's the reframe that should sit with you longer than the rest. Susan Cain writes about introverts learning to recognize and respect their own restorative needs, rather than treating them as an inconvenience to override. Knowing precisely how much socializing you can hold before the cost outweighs the reward isn't a limitation. It's a form of self-knowledge most people never bother to develop, because they've never needed to. Think about what that actually requires. You have to notice the early signs of overload, respect them before you're depleted, and build your life around honoring them instead of apologizing for them. That's not fragility. That's energy management, done on purpose, in a culture that rarely teaches anyone to do it at all. So the tiredness you've spent years quietly explaining away was never the flaw. Reading it accurately and knowing what to do about it was the skill hiding the whole time. When did you first realize you had to plan your energy the way other people plan their schedule? So here's what was actually happening. Every time you came home wrung out from something you enjoyed, your brain was spending more to process the room, running a different reward ledger than the people lighting up around you, and quietly building a physiological bill that only real recovery could pay off. None of that makes you less social. It makes you someone whose social life comes with real costs and real accounting, and who's finally learning to read the numbers instead of arguing with them. Here's a small challenge for this week. Before your next plan, block out recovery time in advance, not after you're already depleted, but before you even walk in the door, like you're budgeting for it on purpose. And tell me in the comments, realistically, how long is your social battery before you need to disappear and recharge? I read every single one, and I think you'll find you're in very good company. If this is the first time someone's put real numbers behind what your evenings actually cost you, subscribe. This is a quiet corner of the internet, built for minds like yours. One quiet truth, every week. Take care of that thoughtful mind of yours. And I'll see you in the next quiet one.